Welcome, everybody. My name is Billy Taylor, and I'm excited to be here today to talk about deliberate practice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a series of steps around deliberate practice and break down some of the how to's of the deliberate practice. So, driving excellence in companies, it's really a two-sided coin. The first side is about scientific thinking. Okay. The second side or the other side is about deliberate practice to develop that scientific thinking. But today, what I really want to center on is the deliberate practice side of the coin. I think it's critical as people go on their journeys, and I'm going to give some specific answers on how to do that. So, what is deliberate practice? It's actually a combination of performance married with experience. And so, as people and teams go out on their journeys, deliberate practice is a specific focus on the aspects of the work that you like to accomplish. It's also purposeful and systematic. You hear in Shingo about constancy of purpose. I'm going to tie back to how critical that is to deliberate practice. But most importantly, around breaking down the details of every process and management practice to drive excellence. And last, deliberately and repeatedly doing continuous improvement in a cycle. And that's what deliberate practice really is. But I'm going to talk about how do you go about it. And let's start with constancy of purpose. In the Shingo model, it talks about an unwavering clarity of why the organization exists, where is it going, and how will it get there. That's important. If you read the book by Simon Sinek, he continuously focuses on starting with why. The second part of constancy of purpose is enabling people to align their actions as well as innovate and adapt their actions to change. Putting people in position so that they can take risk in a psychological safe space with greater confidence. When you marry this constancy of purpose with deliberate practice, success is not that difficult. So before we get started, I'm going to ask the audience to do something for me in the chat box. I want you to type in the word no for me. And I'm going to give everyone about 5 seconds, 10 seconds to type in the word no. And I'm looking at my screen to see how many people participate. This is important to the coaching of deliberate practice. Okay? Now that I see the numbers going up, how many of you put no, N-O? And see, no, when you're thinking deliberate practice, that's about a mindset. When you say no, it means stop, fear, failure, don't go forward. And psychologically, your mind says opportunity is nowhere. What's interesting, how many typed in the word K-N-O-W? See, what that means is to understand, embrace, take action. And that's what drives deliberate practice because it focuses on building capability so that people know better and can do better. And if you look at that word, it looks identical. That phrase, opportunity is nowhere, it shifts and the mind shifts to now it says opportunity is now here. See, with deliberate practice, you break down steps. You have a genuine focus and intent to drive excellence. And I'm going to explain why is that critical, not only in day-to-day operations, but also strategic planning, okay? Building cultures, leading people. Deliberate practice covers all of those elements of driving excellence. Why is it important to have principles around deliberate practice? Here's why. Most companies center on accountability. Deliberate practice centers on ownership. It drives ownership to the lowest level of the organization. Here's a pyramid of success. As we used to drive accountability in businesses, leaders felt that they ran everything. They felt accountability was the key. So here's what that pyramid represents. It says 5% of the people in businesses believe they make everything happen. Those are the senior executives. 15% of the people, the middle management group, they watch things happen. They're dictated to. And 80% on the shop floor or at the lowest level of the organization, in a structure of accountability, true driving, they just wait to be told what to do. With deliberate practice, 80% of the people make things happen. That 15%, they drive strategy deployment, enabling and governing. And that 5%, they continue to share the vision and the strategy, but they do it deliberately. So everybody knows their role in driving excellence. And when you get that piece of it really focused and centered down to all levels of the organization starts to have ownership for results, ownership for growth. Let's just talk the deliberate practice on building cultures. Breaking that down, you focus on change readiness. How do you break those elements down to shaping your culture? Right? Deliberate practice on building a common purpose. Deliberate practice on focusing on what priorities we're going to focus on. The best teams use deliberate practice to talk about how we win, how we work, and where we focus. And also deliberate practice drives ownership to the individual so people know how they contribute to winning. Also, driving it down to building the organization's capabilities. The great teams that drive excellence are the most successful teams. They focus on deliberate practice when building their strategic formulations and deploying their strategy. Again, linking the common purpose to the culture. Again, focusing on priorities on their capabilities, not just the mindset. There's a marriage to both. And again, when you start talking about your organizational capabilities, you use deliberate practice to show the enterprise how they contribute to meeting customer demands and providing value to the customer. And last, they use this deliberate practice around communication, the strategic messaging. How do they break that down? How do you break it down into steps? A common understanding, using deliberate practice to have a common meaning versus a common language. Okay, most companies that I've had to interact with, they go into the organization, or consultants go into the organization, and they're so focused on using the buzzwords of operational excellence instead of focusing on what's the common meaning. Again, there's that line again, focus priorities. Even with deliberate practice, you make a concerted effort on linking that to your culture and shared beliefs, your capabilities, and how you're going to drive excellence. And you also focus on the quality of your communication. I'm going to talk about why is that important. It starts with the approach. Before you can really go into deliberate practice, you must start with the standard. What's in front of me is a baseball plate, home plate. It's 17 inches. Whether you play Little League baseball, high school baseball, college baseball, or even make it to the pros and major leagues, home plate's 17 inches. I recently saw a video of this coach, John Scalinos, and he was talking at a conference, and he was sharing his methods for longevity and continued success, and why his teams repeatedly remain at the top of the ranks. And he said he worked off of a standard. And he says, great teams don't widen the plate if the pitcher can't get the ball across the plate. They work on the standards for improvement so that they can consistently and repeatedly meet the customer expectations. But when you're talking about standards, as leaders, what you accept, you can't change. What you tolerate becomes the standard. And so when you're talking about deliberate practice, if you don't have a standard, then you're just practicing. And when you're just practicing, you may see some improvement, but those improvements will plateau. So what's the difference in regular practice and deliberate practice? Regular practice is a mindless repetition. You get into it. In most factories I've worked in, the operators, they got so focused on just doing the same thing every day, and they come in and drop their lunchbox, and then they just go doing the same thing over and over without a continuous improvement mindset. With deliberate practice, it's a focused attention on every specific step of the process so that you know where you can improve. And you have a process, or a PDCA, plan, do, check, act process of getting better. And that's why deliberate practice trumps regular practice. And I'll explain why later on. So how does deliberate practice work? One, first, intent. You must be purposeful and systematic about improving. And so when you heard of constancy of purpose, you continuously put that in front of the team, okay, for alignment. And then you have a systematic approach to driving excellence. Focus. The attention span in operations, something happens every minute, every second, and you have to be agile. But when that happens, how do you maintain your focus? For deliberate practice, it must be visual. It must show focus so we know when things are out of kilter. Goal-oriented. With deliberate practice, it must be specific. You must have the end game in mind. Successful plants use SMART goals so that they're achievable, they're measurable. You must have a process for deliberate practice. It's not just winging it. Always exploring, experimenting, and refining. It's wash, rinse, repeat. Wash, rinse, repeat. And last, extreme ownership. For deliberate practice to hold and adhere, you must have extreme ownership. With ownership, people tend to concentrate and focus more when they know they own it. But in a nutshell, deliberate practice is around focusing on KPIs that deliver the KPI. So what are KPIs? KPIs are the key performance actions that deliver the key performance indicators. And if you look to the left, a key performance action, if I want to lose weight, I can't stand on the scale every morning and wonder what happens. That's a key performance indicator. And often leaders walk in for the start of their day, they look for the red, green signs, and they go right to the KPI. Did we win or not? Rather than focusing on the KPIs, instead of focusing on the KPIs, you should go to the KPIs that says, here are the steps that I should take to get the end results. And often when you skip steps, you don't get repeated results. Here's a bulletin board or a daily visual board, whatever you like to call it. First, I have the 10-second rule. When I go into operations, I stand 10 feet from the board and I walk back from the board. Then I stop 5 to 10 people that work in the area. And I ask the people, what does that board mean to you? And what I'm looking for is deliberate practice. What I'm looking for is, do they own the board? And so if you look at this board here, you'll see the left side are the KPIs. That's the standard of performance that we would like to get to. But the right side is the KPIs. So if you look Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, what the teams are challenged to do is to come in and go through deliberate practice and focus on KPIs. So basically what they go in and look and say for third shift, did we walk the line and make sure that this specific item was addressed? And they broke down the cycle to realize that that's what's hurting them for performance or constraining them from achieving their objectives. And they track their KPAs and their KPIs. So as a leader, when I walk by and I say, why aren't I making it on deliveries? I can look and say, what are the issues around the actions? And down to the right, on the right side, the lower half of the graph, as you see here, now I can see what actions are the individuals taking to drive performance. And when I focus on my KPIs become more consistent. I start achieving things beyond the goals, but it centers on extreme ownership. Instead of leaders owning the process, now the people in the crews own the process and they're driving excellence. But in most cases, without deliberate practice, organizations go right here. They focus right on the KPI rather than the KPA. Deliberate practice helps organizations manage the intersections. This is the center of excellence. And I'll go through deliberate practice, breaking the steps down. This is quality. As you can see, here's what's called a purpose map, our strategy on a page, all trend charts. If I look at how am I doing for quality, month to date, I'm on plan. Year to date, I'm off plan. Now let's shift down, deliberate practice. I'm gonna break that performance down, okay, by layers. And I'm saying, okay, I got value stream 1, value stream 2, value stream 3. Value stream 2 is what's causing the whole plant to be off. If I look at year to date, it's value stream 1. Instead of bringing the organization in and scolding them or giving bad news, I can center on where the issue is, and I can center on where the constraint is and leverage the good departments to help train the organization. Deliberate practice is critical when you're doing strategy deployment as well. Again, a common meaning. And so as companies and leaders, as you build strategies from your mission to your strategies, from your strategies to objectives, from your objectives to goals to action, you must use deliberate practice to break those steps down because they're different. And often Hoshin-Connery processes and methods stall in middle management because we didn't do the deliberate practice to convert that strategy to the lowest level for improvement. And so aligning to win, when organizations do deliberate practice, they say, okay, here's a strategy from corporate headquarters. We break that down through deliberate practice. We focus on departments and areas, and then we go to a plant. That plant, again, through deliberate practice, break the strategy down, go into the department. And from there, they go to the individual, to the board you saw. And so the common meaning, the operator may not understand the we're going to hit our EBIT. We have a ROI on this project, return on investment here, but they do understand, here are my indicators. If I hit my targets for the day, I control my waste, I control my spend, and if I hit this repeatedly day in and day out, the company will be successful. It's the same thing, different meaning, or a different language, different way of saying it. So it's a common language, common meaning, okay? And that's why deliberate practice is important. Here's a deliberate practice process we use to break down our strategy and break down our performance. And it's like the center of excellence you just saw. So if I look at my plant or my enterprise, where am I losing? Quality, delivery, finance. Well, let's go down to the next tier as we broke this down using deliberate practice. Value stream 1, value stream 2, value stream 3. I have a big problem in value stream 3. However, value stream 1 is running very well. But if I brought the entire plant and did a town hall meeting, and I started telling the plant, we are horrible in quality, delivery, performance, how do you think value stream 1 feels for their delivery? But however, they do need to focus on safety. But let's just use deliberate practice to break it down into steps and sequences. And I'll go here, value stream 3 is where my real issue is. So using deliberate practice, I break down value stream 3, as you see here, where I thought I had a complete disaster brewing there. Through deliberate practice, I can tell really in value stream 3, quality is really in department 2. I've got a problem there. Building 3 is constraining the whole plant. But if I really look at that through deliberate practice, I really have an issue in department 3. And so using the deliberate practice, I can now hone in what capabilities I need to improve, what constraints I need to eliminate. But I'm going to use a safety and environmental health action register to go down to the next layer. And this is a safety function. And so when I look at a safety function, as you can see, this would be a performance map. The KPAs that deliver the KPI is the OSHA rate. So that's what, as a plant, determine what was winning, or what's the pain point. And we said, what are the KPAs to driving safety? Audits, compliance findings, lockout, tagout procedures, near miss closures, CapEx. So when it came to safety, what's the KPA that we're not following? Oh, we're doing our audits, but we only correct the items 57% of the time. And so we've zeroed down through deliberate practice, what are the actions we need to take? And if you look at the bottom, we have actually an action register on a page that says, these are the things we're going to do to correct our performance. Yet our performance is exceeding our goal, but look at all the opportunity there that we've discovered through deliberate practice. And so when we meet monthly, all of those actions are assigned owners, and we continue to break the process down so that we can disseminate where the issues are. We also use performance maps. Not only did you see that R chart in that building, but through deliberate practice, you must assign owners at every intersection. It's not just indicators, because in the absence of ownership comes blame. If people don't know what they own, then they'll tend to blame. But when people know what they own, they feel valued. And I have a saying, if you make people visible, they will make you valuable. That's why we do what's called ownership maps. We also trend. Through deliberate practice, you must have a measure of where you are, right? Your current condition, where you want to go, your target condition, and then identifying those gaps. And as you start to improve, you'd like to know, are those actions working? Are those deliberate actions you're taking working? And again, you're using a PDCA model, but I track the past 2 years. I want to know, going back, current monthly trends. Every year, if you look, I spike. What month do I spike? July. I know that. So now my deliberate actions, I can start to identify what are the issues that are causing me to spike in July. Is it the heat? Okay. And last, quarterly performance. I want to avoid the hockey stick. And often when companies start missing their targets, they back end load it. Through this process in deliberate practice, you don't back end load it. You address the issues as they come forward, and you continue to improve through the cycle of the year. But deliberate practice is not just practice. So if you look at just practice, companies that go in and they start on their CI journeys, and they develop this repetition, and often they plateau. Their skills improve, but they plateau. With deliberate practice, it's step change, it's step change, it's step change, and you continue to improve. Here's also a deliberate practice in my personal life. This is my son, and he actually played for the high school LeBron James played for. And I put this slide in here on purpose. Every morning, my son and I went to the gym to put up 200 to 300 shots. And the goal was to get him up to 60% from the three-point line. And every day we did deliberate practice, breaking his shot down. And on this particular day, I dropped him off and I had to attend a meeting. And at that point, I was working at Goodyear, and he sends me this picture. And as you can see, he shot 87% on his day. I was blown away. And but when I looked at the picture, I looked at his face. He looked sad. And I called him and I said, "Hey son, what's wrong?" He goes, "Nothing, Dad. Why do you ask?" I said, "Look at the look on your face. 87%. That's great." He said, "Dad, today I realized something around leadership. I often hear you say good leaders measure what matters. But Dad, I'll tell you, the great ones embrace the fact that everything that matters can't be measured. See, Dad, every day I got a chance to know you, and I realized you weren't just working on my shot, you were working on me as a person. As leaders, do you focus on just the indicators or do you focus on the actions? If you look at my son, you know what he said to me? He said, Dad, that 87% didn't mean anything because you weren't here. He says, today I realize I'll never remember all the games you came to, but I'll never forget the two you missed. That rocked me. As you see him standing there with the trophy, but I want to share something with you. Although it's critical to measure what matters with deliberate practice, you must incorporate that in your leadership practices. See, when they won the championship, that back-to-back state championship, my son didn't run to cut down the nets. He didn't run to the trophy. He ran to his dad. And we cried for about 2 minutes. And when he got back to school, he sent me this text. He says, I'm crying in the car thinking about you, Dad. Thank you for always being there for me. I love you so much. You don't understand what you've done for me. And I said, my reply was, I love you, son, more than life. What's comprehensive? You bring me joy. I'm blessed. God, let me be your dad. The essence of deliberate practice, it can't just be around numbers. It has to be your day-to-day activities, how you treat people, how you shape your culture, how you drive excellence. But that being said, I'm going to pause and answer any questions.
First question, do you recommend kata techniques for deliberate practice?
Yes. Yes. I think Mike Rother and his process, right, when he talks about deliberate practice and how he goes about it, I actually work with a client and they use the kata practices, married with Shingo practices. And I mean, it's continuous improvement. Yes, I do recommend it.
Next question, how many KPAs should an area adopt? How many are too many and create clutter?
I do not go above 5 KPAs. That is my maximum limit on KPIs. Here's why, because you're exactly right. People will clutter. Here's in one of the organizations that I'm working with, the president came in and made a mandate and says, no, put this on that board, put this on their board. You've got their attention. And the plant manager says, no, we have 5. And that is the 5 that the team focuses on to drive excellence. Now, on every single board, those KPIs may be different. The KPIs are non-negotiable, but the KPIs, what do you need to do to get to your excellence point?
Last question, what do you suggest people begin this, or sorry, where do you suggest people begin this journey?
I believe you assess your reality first. Before I go in or work with a team and go in and put boards in, and I assess, do people understand what's the target condition or where you want to go, or then and also go in and assess where you're at. And from that, I have a standard of performance standards. And then I drive from there. And then I interview the people. Make sure you engage the people. Here's why. Do it with the people, not to the people. And I heard it asked before, why do lean journeys fail? Often I see it because teams and companies go in, they do it to the people rather than with the people. And guess what? There's no ownership. And when there's no ownership, then people start to blame. Right. And I kind of did this in a show. You'll find leaders and employees blaming each other. And they're doing the Saturday Night Fever dance. Right. That's that one. I stand alive, stand alive. And they're just blaming people. And that's their survival technique. And that doesn't drive excellence, because you have to create that psychological safe space for people to fail. I celebrate the red. I celebrate the red so that people can bring more issues to me.